June has played the line that Anna called for, our Anna here in studio, and it's getting tougher. And I'm just fascinated by the conversation about whether June ends up with 100% accuracy at the end of this game. So, wild stuff, and we are off.
That's something that we will definitely need to check out, and we will also zone in on the opening choice here for Armageddon. Reminder on the format that white starts with more time, 3 extra minutes, but black has draw odds. What do you think of the opening decision, David?
Yeah, it's still early days. I think Magnus is now choosing a setup. He started with the Reti opening, bringing his knight out to f3 on move 1. It's now transposing back towards a Queen's Indian. This is a Queen's Indian position, which can be seen via 1d4 move order. So both players are really flexible, really agile. It's a bit of a hybrid here. Black's next move is bishop to b4, given the opportunity. So I have seen Magnus deploy the move a3 here. I believe this is the Petrosian system. Putting a pawn on the square, covering any potential pin. There we go. Magnus does play this. Still very well-known territory, and Fabi jumps in with his knight. Not the most common move, but a way of trying to trade off pieces because black is slightly cramped. Yeah, I'm not sure. I think Magnus will have a long-term small advantage because he'll have most of the pawn center. We'll see a bishop trade now. So Fabi just needs to be solid, but he's been playing very quickly. So from that point of view, I totally understand Fabi's choice.
Yeah, great news for the speed of Fabi. Danny, how do you see these lines as in terms of, you know, Fabi so well, and how comfortable will he be? He needs to only secure a draw. He doesn't need more than a solid position, right? And speed.
Well, I think you point out, I think the clock is the main thing that will determine how comfortable Fabi is, right? He doesn't want to get down that much on time. He's almost gotten that once 3-minute time advantage down to 2, so achieving his goal there. But I was going to say, I also think that Magnus is in a comfortable position that he can push. It's going to be a space advantage that he could write home about. You know, it's comfy, it's cozy. He'll be in control of how aggressive he wants to play on both sides of the board. Like, literally, you can play a4 and a5 in this position. You can play bishop b2 and play for e4 in this position. So, Fabiano playing fast, and I like that. But Magnus also the king of Armageddon in a good spot.
Ooh, a5 stopping Magnus from getting connect 5. I was going to say maybe Magnus would play a4 and e4, get the 5 members of the boy band back together along the 4th rank. But okay, challenging White's pawn structure on that flank. I think a good choice by Fabiano, at least to clarify the tension. And you can't stay kind of suffocated for too long on your first few ranks. A set of trades of rooks might actually help Black. Yeah, it feels like Fabi is solid enough, but the key moment's still ahead, Anna.
Yeah, and I am curious if he's going to want to force that rook trade, or does he have something else in mind? What are the options here for Black, David? Oh, yeah. He doesn't want us to discuss other options. He is going for a takes b4 and potentially the rook trade, or queen b8 with the idea of queen b7 and then trade rooks, I believe.
Great choice. I think it was wise to open the A file before Magnus changed his mind and closed it back up again, because then the black pieces might be looking silly. But now it's pretty much guaranteed that one set of rooks minimum will come off the board. Magnus needs to find an avenue of attack. He needs to get in somehow.
Yep. This is a good hold by Fabi. I mean, I'm just agreeing that I think Magnus is going to have to find new lines. A5 was a nice strike, because I was talking about how Magnus was really in control of all the options, but A5 took it down some forcing roads. Fabi is a player who he's often talked about by his peers, looks for the most concrete solution to the problems he has, and then takes it in both strengths and weaknesses at times. But when Fabi finds a concrete way to set up a defense, he goes for it, and he did so here. I think everything's going to come off the A file. And how does Magnus open up targets? Well, maybe this is it. Maybe he's going queen e4, queen h4, queen g4. He's going to slide over to that. Okay, you've got queen c6 on the brain. I've got mate on the brain. Queen g4 and d5, and like the g7 pawn. Launching an attack like this that is dubious is exactly what I would do in a classical game, but is not always a bad idea in a blitz game where your opponent doesn't have a lot of time.
Yeah, it did stop queen b7. That was the only thing I wanted to add to it. So it is stopping Fabi's idea, but the computer wants to actually make that happen regardless and would sacrifice a pawn to make it happen. Pawn to d5 is the engine's suggestion, because if you take on d5 with the pawn, then you can play queen b7, and the pawn is pinned, you will capture back on d5 later.
That's really clever, Anna. Will he find it, Fabiano? A long think now for 1 minute. I think queen c6 is such a big threat that you might need to take drastic measures anyway, so he might be forced to find this.
What a move. Oh, he does find it. Fabiano plays d5, the best engine move. Although another idea, both queen to b7 was possible because of the pin. That was Anna's line, which I think was even better. But knight f6 kind of does the trick to get the queen out, though Magnus saw this coming and immediately retreats to get the c6 square back on the agenda.
Ooh, and this is the other reason maybe the black knight should have stayed on d7. Now the white knight has an entry point, huge outpost. You cannot, for example, take this loose pawn on b4. That would fall to a knight fork. The knight would land on c6, hitting the black queen, hitting the bishop. Still solid enough. Fabiano's pieces controlling some key squares. It's going to be hard for Magnus to break in, but the white knight will look very pretty on this c6 outpost, supported potentially by a pawn on b5. White has to be careful, though, of some counterattacks against the kingside if the white knight journeys so far from home.
And this shows you why Anna's idea of queen b7 was actually even better. Instead of knight f6 by Fabi, it would have coordinated black's pieces and not seeing queen c2 with tempo and then knight e5. I think this is now getting a little tricky. Okay, the queen slides over, but it's passive, and Magnus is definitely going to get some long-term chances with a nice outposted knight on c6.
Yes, it's getting harder for Fabiano. Magnus is calculating whether he should take on a8 or something else to do. He does go for the rook trade and then brings his second rook, now only rook, onto the open file, the only fully open file.
Wow, and offers a queen trade, Magnus Carlsen. Makes sense. I guess black might have had some counterplay on the king side if the white knight sank its teeth into that square. Magnus's queen instead is the one to post up on c6. The plan of improvement, though, it's not obvious. He's really trying to enter the black camp, but black's got everything covered. There's only one weakness. It's held by the bishop right now. How does Fabi try to break out? The 3-minute time deficit is still intact. h5, when in doubt, push the h pawn. I think Magnus
do
might
the
get the same.
f0, push the pawn to h5 or h4 if you're playing with the white pieces. It does look scary, though, from if you're playing this with the black pieces. h3, what a classy move, making sure that there's no knight jumps to g4, making sure that there's no back rank issues. It's just a multi-purpose move in general.
I love it. Do the alpha zero. That sounds like a dance. We should come up with a dance for do the alpha zero. But no, h5 in this case freed the back rank for Fabi as well. But it's not enough to free up his position overall. Find me ways to improve black's pieces here, right? And you don't really want to take on e5 because then the c7 pawn is super weak. So now queen to c1. By the way, immediately threatening the fork of knight to c6. So Fabi gets out of the forking way, as they say. And now after queen e6. It's up for Magnus to try to undermine that bishop on d6. Is he going to go for bishop a3 at some point? You don't really want to let black take e5, but if you get rid of that bishop on d6, black's position crumbles, and the c7 pawn goes first.
Yeah, that's the glue that's holding black's position together right now, so it would make a lot of sense to force it off the board. First, he moves his knight, so not allowing the bishop for knight trade. And next, Magnus is, there we go, going to play bishop to a3. Very logical, very kind of thematic stuff, step by step, these small steps kind of building up to potentially a big advantage.
And he finds it. We were calling for it. He's undermining the linchpin, the key piece to black's position. It's now been traded, and c7 is in Magnus's eye there, Anna.
It is, and black has a choice here. 3 pieces can capture on d6, but it feels like neither of them will be the full solution to black's issues. It is very unpleasant to have to hold on to that c7 backward pawn, but the alternatives weren't better either.
Yeah, and look at this, Magnus ganging up. It's that one weakness. Fabi's desperately trying to keep things tight here, just shutting out the white pieces for now. But the suffering might continue. Not clear what black's next move is, but can white make progress? That's the big question. Maybe given an opportunity, black will start coming in with his queen, so Magnus won't want to allow any counterplay. Ultimately, though, Fabi, we've seen him crack in this tournament in Armageddon when the clocks tick down, and not great news for him that he's still significantly behind on the clock.
Yeah, this is only move 29. A reminder that they only start getting increments from move 41 onwards, and even that is only a 1 second increment. So Fabi really has to speed up, and the time will be a key, crucial, decisive factor in this game.
Yeah, it's a good point, because now that you've gotten the game to this point, Fabi about to get under 2.5 minutes, you don't even have to improve your position too much over the next move. F3 is a risky move for sure, especially with Fabi having already played H4, or sorry, H5. H4 is coming next. That's a surprising move from Magnus, and Fabi doesn't take long to pop the knight into G3. I really don't like that move. That created mating nets for the white king. The alpha 0 pawn now lives. That's the whole reason you play H5 instead of just H6, is the opportunities to get things like this. So that was a really surprising move from Magnus, a very rare mistake, just to be honest.
Yeah, madness from Magnus. That's very unlike him, I've got to say. Normally king safety, we've heard it before, that's his number one priority in Armageddon. As long as his king is safe, he'll grind down opponents in the endgame, he'll go on the attack himself, he'll do anything. But Fabi, yeah, great chances the rest of this game now.
Yeah, F3 is also... it seems to be questioned, obviously, by a computer, too, for all the many reasons that you guys mentioned. And David, I was recalling, you mentioned the king safety factor, how Magnus really always tries to make sure his king is safe. You also talked about pawn pushes, how he wants to force or provoke his opponents to push pawns because pawns don't go backwards, so he can create weaknesses. But it feels like now he did both to himself, and he might be regretting it because he's in the tank now.
I think he's totally regretting it. It's a great call. And no, he broke Magnus Carlsen's own rules. Magnus Carlsen broke Magnus Carlsen's rules, which don't push unnecessary pawns. Don't get your king safe in these Armageddon tiebreakers, David. You said it. And it's actually the opposite point I was about to make. He played F3 while I was talking because I was going to double down on what Anna said, which is now that Fabi's under time pressure, Magnus didn't even have to prove his advantage necessarily. He could have kept squeezing. The black queen and black rook are totally stuck to that C7 pawn, as you could see. But F3 was a just completely non-Magnus Carlsen-like move. And by the way, there's a fork on E2. If the knight goes to E2, that's a check, the king and queen, and it's a problem. So you're going to see Magnus stop that. But Fabiano Caruana is right back in this game. And by the way, Zhu and Jun is still playing a perfect chess game on the right-hand side. It is 100% accuracy, no jokes, according to the Chess.com engine analysis and the computer aggregated precision score, which is CAPS for those who speak old Chess.com before we just changed that bad acronym to accuracy. But the computer aggregated precision score, a little bit of the secret sauce that goes into some of our fair play. Not actually very much at all, for those who wonder. There's so much more to it. But a little bit of accuracy goes a long way, and in Zhu Wenjun's case, it's 100% accurate and crazy. So we'll come back to that in a minute. Right now, we're going to focus on the Armageddon battle and whether Magnus can make up for that mistake he made.
Ben Feingold is having a meltdown right now, no matter where he is. White just played F3. Black's like, oh, I'll copy you. I'll play F6. Don't try this at home, guys and gals. That white knight is kicked back. So actually maybe a decent move from Fabiano there, but ultimately both kings now, for the rest of this game, Anna, are going to be facing all sorts of headaches.
Yeah, this is going to be a really exciting game to follow, with now the time situation also being a lot more balanced, since Magnus Carlsen's last few moves took him over a minute and a half of thinking.
Yeah, and look at that beautiful black knight. The white knight was glorious on C6 just a few moves ago. Suddenly it's not sure which way it's going. The white king now steps forward. And, okay, can Fabiano continue the momentum in his favor? He also moves his king. He was just reacting the first half of this game. Suddenly, Fabi might kind of change the pace and start attacking. But watch out. The white queen lining up against that black king on the diagonal.
Discover checks on the agenda unless Fabi steps out of the diagonal or blocks it with one of his pieces.
By the way, just to remind everybody of the stakes of this game, Magnus Carlsen only secures at least a tie for first if he wins this Armageddon battle. If he loses it, Hikaru Nakamura can still win clear first, which, by the way, last year he won in the last round and ultimately took home the victory. And we're not going to get into it right now, but Hikaru has achieved the moves we talked about with C5 and Queen D5. So, no jokes, Hikaru's chances of pulling a come-from-behind victory as black against Praggnanandhaa are still alive. And that just sets the table that if Magnus loses this Armageddon battle, he might lose the Norway Chess title along the way.
And nerves are creeping in here. The clock is ticking down. Inaccuracy is starting to appear. Magnus is eyeing up that weakness we talked about on C7, but there was a discovered check available. He didn't go for it. He didn't jump with the white knight. Watch out. The black king feeling really uneasy, and Fabi's playing with fire.
I feel like you almost fell out of your chair there after rook to e7. You weren't on camera, but you're feeling uneasy, although Fabi pointing out that, okay, you got a discovered check, and then what? I'm actually fascinated by it. This is great content.
Just looks like checkmate. I mean,
yeah, does he just want to
jumping.
push f5? So if the knight goes to, let's say, f4 check, he will push f5 and say you don't have any attack. Is that it?
I think you're right, Anna. He'll have to, but f5's an ugly move to have to play. Magnus jumps in with his knight. Fabi only has one move to avoid instant checkmate. He needs to block with his own knight with a check. There we go.
Wow.
Knight's disappearing. Look at the center of the board now, suddenly. It's a discovered check.
What in
Fabi
the
blocks.
world? Fabi saw all of this. He's responding instantly, down to 35 seconds to 1:10 for Magnus. But Fabi in a better spot to draw than he was before in a queen ending that could get perpetual check for Magnus.
Wow, it's deja vu. Magnus ground down Fabi in a queen endgame earlier in the tournament, but the blue arrow appears. Only one move to keep it. Magnus is going to win a pawn. He'll be a pawn up, but black has a passed b pawn. If Fabi finds this move, he might well just draw.
He has to speed up. He's going to flag if he doesn't.
He doesn't find the move. He plays the obvious and human check. Apparently, it's not enough. Magnus picking up pawns, although I'm also scared if I'm Magnus, because that b pawn is running, and if you check the black king forever, it's just a draw.
But now the d pawn. This is why Fabi needed to put his queen on d3 earlier. He would have gained a tempo in the process. He's allowed the white pawn to run as well. And white's d pawn, one step closer than black's b pawn to promotion.
Oh, this is really such deja vu for what you mentioned, David. Fabiano already went down in a queen endgame earlier in classical chess. And this is happening now in Armageddon. Fabi is a couple of moves behind.
Oh, and he just looked over the clock. He's got 5 seconds. He's got 4 seconds. He's going to flag. He's got to move. He's got 2 seconds. Oh, and he knows it. Queen e7 check, and here comes d7. And he's run out of time. And Magnus Carlsen, the king of Armageddon, does it again, winning on demand and securing that he will at least tie for first here at 2024 Norway Chess. And Hikaru Nakamura needs to win in classical to force a tiebreaker.